Ms. Kathy Lueders is the Starbase General Manager, the first woman to lead NASA's Human Exploration and Operations Mission Directorate. Senior leader with 30 years experience with the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. So, everybody welcome Ms. Kathy Lueders.
Okay, we'll get ready to go. First of all, let me say thank you so much for AIA Lower Rio Grande Valley for having me here and being able to tell you a little bit of our exciting journey that's happening right here in the Rio Grande Valley as we are trying to bring human space flight from the lower Rio Grande Valley to Mars. So hopefully one day, what you'll find out is that we, within SpaceX, have lofty goals. And one of our goals is to be able to make human space flight and have us be an interplanetary species. And we firmly believe that unless you have lofty goals, you don't achieve big things. And so as you can see over this last year and a half, and really over the last, and I'll talk a little bit about the SpaceX journey total, our big goal has been to be able to create and bring down the cost of space flight, and with that be able to enable space travel. So let me get started. Marisol keeping me straight there. I've learned that I can't kind of keep track of my speech and my charts at the same time, so she always she keeps me out of trouble. So let me talk a little bit about, first of all, what is SpaceX? And then I'll talk a little bit about what we're trying to do at Starbase and how Starbase is evolving. And then I'll talk a little bit about Starship and our advances in Starship. And most of all, I'll have some really cool videos from our flights that we've been doing. And so we'll talk about our evolutionary journey. At SpaceX, we firmly believe that you learn from flying. And so we're constantly building hardware and flying and having each mission achieve more and more of our successive goals that we want to have to be able to achieve our long-term missions and vision of where we need to be going. But you learn so much through flying. So next slide. SpaceX. So I started actually working with SpaceX when SpaceX was had less than 100 people. And Elon Musk started the company in 2002, just with a few folks. And at the time, he just had a design for an engine, for the Merlin engine. But he had this lofty goal of if there's a way, and at the time when you looked at space flight across the board, it was just struggling with how can we get the cost of space flight down to have it be actually at a cost point where we can really open up the aperture on the kinds of missions that we'll be able to do from a human spaceflight standpoint. So starting with that engine, then he started building and working Falcon 1, and you'll see our succession path as we're beginning to grow and evolve our designs along the way, leading up to the Starship design where we are today. But next slide just kind of shows all the different facilities. SpaceX really just started in a little building in Hawthorne, like in LA. And if you can see, we've been growing and expanding the sites based on what we need to be able to support the product lines. So we had the site in LA. We moved to a large production facility in Hawthorne, California, so that we could start building and expanding our Falcon 9 rockets. Then we needed to be able to launch, and so you either launch at the Cape at the time, and then also added another West Coast launch capability in Vandenberg. But then you have all these launches, you start realizing, okay, what are we going to launch? Well, we realized we can enable the Starlink and communication capability across the world if we use our lower cost launches to be able to then fly our own Starlink satellites. So we actually build that Starlink market based on us being able to have excess launch capability. And so you can see we keep adding facilities to be able to support our particular activities that we have. in Texas, and Texas is kind of a powerhouse state for us because we have the McGregor facility outside Waco that actually does all the testing on both our Falcon 9 Merlin engines and all the Raptor engines that we put on our Starship vehicles, but also does our first and second stage testing for the Falcon 9s. So every single rocket that goes up to space is touched by Texas. And then obviously I'm going to talk a bunch more about Starbase and what we're doing here in the lower Rio Grande Valley. If you just step back from this little company that really only did its first successful Falcon 9 mission in 2010, by 2023, SpaceX had taken over 87% of the world launch market. So you can see if you have this vision of how do I get spaceflight down to the lowest cost point ever, then that's really what gives us a huge advantage. And honestly opened the door for huge industries across the board. Like without that cost point, people wouldn't be, just the Starlink mission is there, but other constellations, us being able to fly cargo to the International Space Station, flying crew to the International Space Station, those are all enabled by us being able to have this fleet of vehicles. The next slide just gives you a little bit of a sense of the little dot on the left-hand side is a person. And then if you look over at Starship, it's close to 400 feet tall. Oh, there it goes. There it goes. Makes me a little nervous for the videos coming up, but we'll all keep our fingers crossed and let it go. I saw the other video go. I was very happy to see those thank yous, so I'm hoping the same, that we start hearing some roaring engines when we get to ours. If you think about it, when we flew to the moon, when NASA flew to the moon, on the Saturn V, it was the most powerful rocket that had ever been around the world. And that vehicle had about 8 million pounds of thrust. And it was what really enabled to be able to fly the Apollo capsules and be able to have our missions go to the moon. The Starship has almost 17 million pounds of thrust, double the Saturn V. And when you look at that payload capability, that's really what's going to enable the missions going forward for space exploration, for NASA, the international partners, and is really going to be the cargo workhorse for our exploration missions, but also is going to be flying the human lander on our Artemis 3 mission. It'll be launching uncrewed, and then we'll rendezvous with the Orion crew capsule around the moon, and then be landing on the moon. So you can see that we've been building these successive capabilities, focusing on how do we continue to bring this cost of upmass down to be able to enable more and more advancing missions going forward. So each of these, it doesn't just happen overnight. You know, it took a little while to go from that engine to the first Falcon 9 mission. And we had a single engine Falcon, the Falcon 1, and even between 2002 and 2008, I mean, it was 6 years of trying to get a successful Falcon 1 mission. Elon always jokes about, what's the quickest way to become a space millionaire? Start out as a billionaire and spend a lot of money trying to build rockets and have rockets sometimes work, sometimes not work, and investing in that, and it's a quick way to spend your money. But when you see it and you're building on that investment, you can see that it enables us to be able to execute on these missions that we talked about. Next slide. Let me talk a little bit about Starbase, because this is to me, I always tell everybody, Starbase is owned by everybody here in the lower Rio Grande, because 80% of the folks that are out there working every day at Starbase are from the Rio Grande area. And one of the things I'm most proud about, people used to come up to me when I was working for NASA and be able to say, what can I do to be a rocket scientist? I live out like away from Houston, away from the Kennedy Space Center. Where can I be? And what I am so proud of is that there are people here in the Rio Grande Valley that are every day touching our vehicles that we're going up into space and that are getting us ready to be able to land on the moon and are absolutely going to be working towards us being able to one day go to Mars. So let me just give you a little bit of an overview. The great thing about Starbase, it has concentrated capability to be able to design, produce, test, and launch all in a single site. And what that does for us is it enables us to be able to learn in a test and then be able to go to our production facility if we need to make a part. We actually make a part there, be able to go and then take it and make the modifications at the launch site to be able then to enable us to be able to launch. And we're working towards also returning to the launch site for our next mission. So that is another way for us to be bringing the cost of launch down. SpaceX from the very beginning wanted to have a reusable rocket, something that rocket companies had tried to do for tens of years, and it didn't happen the first time. It took us a little while to be able to get those Falcon 9 first stages, but we now have certain first stages that have landed like 27 times. And what that allows us to do for the Falcon 9 is be able to return that booster and then fly it again days later. It really enables the ability for us to be able to launch. We launched over 150 times between Vandenberg and the Cape last year, and it was really enabled by us having reusability. And so this reusability is going to be a really critical part of us flying our starships and being able to meet the cadence that we need to have happen for our NASA missions that we have coming up, our DoD missions that we have coming up, and we would also like to be able to do it for our Starlink and other missions that we have coming up. But Starbase isn't just a production, test, and launch facility. It's actually a big 450 of us live there. So it's also it's also home for a bunch of us that work at Starbase. It's also, we have a school. We have lots of different activities going on that include us being able to live and work and be able to work on our missions and be able to get those missions done as quickly as possible. Next slide. All this, dun, dun, dun. I have this little, no, next slide. Here. All this takes, it's another place where Elon's starting with billions of dollars and he's continuing to spend because he's investing in our ability to be able to do this and is continued to invest in the facilities that are out there, the hardware that's getting ready right now to be able to fly, the people that are moving down, the homes that we're building, the food, the gym, the school, all the capabilities that we have. And then that all obviously also helps then we need support for all those activities from the Rio Grande Valley. So all of that is investment from the company in the Rio Grande Valley, and obviously we need support from lots of people around for us to be able to conduct the missions that we have going on. This next picture is one of my favorites because, we can talk about hardware a bunch, and you'll see lots of pictures of hardware, but none of it happens without the people. I already talked about how many of the people are homegrown here in the Rio Grande Valley, but it's all those people being dedicated to coming in, working during, hot conditions, dusty conditions, and being able to get things done that enables us right now to be finishing up and building, and we have a close to 1 million square foot factory that's getting finished up in the next few months. We have a new office building that's coming online in the next few months. We have new homes that have been built and even more homes that we'll be investing in. And we're continuing to grow our population of engineers and technicians and production integration folks to be able to increase our cadence and be able to invest even more in the Rio Grande Valley and us being able to launch from this area. So next slide. One of the things that I in particular have enjoyed is being on South Padre Island and being able to be here with the folks that are enjoying the launches. We're hoping that you also, and people are recognizing that these are launches that recognize the talent that's around us, and honestly also recognize that these are steps in our progress to be able to conduct missions that are critical to the U.S. And so the fact that we get to do that, we're having our own, Apollo moon launch here. We feel that excitement from the crowds that come and cheer up with us. And we really want everybody to recognize that this is also your achievement, your activity as we're working through and being able to achieve these different steps along the way. And it's really, really cool to see that the condo owners, the hotel owners, the people around here, that the restaurants are packed, the hotels are packed, and people are enjoying the fact that they get to be with us and be able to celebrate the achievements and the progress that we're making towards our test flights moving forward. So let me talk a little bit more about Starship. You got the little teaser flights, or the slides, so you know that it's big. You saw how much bigger it is than the current fleet that we have, and I already talked about the amount of thrust that the Starship has. What's really, really amazing about this, and I'll run to the next slide for the overview, is just it's really been built for us, as I've already talked about, to be able to return and reuse. And we understand that folks here are not used to being able to see rockets launch and reuse. And so one of the things I wanted to talk to you a little bit about today is that we're trying to let people know what that looks like so that they understand what a successful mission looks like. And a successful mission is going to be when you're going to get to hear the sonic booms. At the Cape, we had to tell everybody when we first started returning, the sonic booms mean that it made it safely to the pad, made it safely back to the pad. If you don't hear anything, it means that we had to send it far away, and you're not going to hear that. You're not going to hear, just like on the last flight, if you were in South Padre, you didn't hear anything when it landed because it was way out in the Gulf when it was landing. We have to be able to show the FAA that we can fail safely. If you notice, we don't work with the FAA on being successful. We work with the FAA on failing safely. And so what I want all of us to hear, if you hear sonic booms on the day of our return, that means that vehicle has come back and it's sitting on the pad, and there are going to be some really super happy SpaceX people. I'm just going to tell you, they're going to be so happy. And if you're out in the crowd in the South Padre, you're going to see SpaceX people just losing it because they're going to be so proud of the fact that they were able to achieve something that nobody else has ever done with a rocket this big. We were able on the last flight to demonstrate to the FAA that we could land to where we said it was going to land for both the Starship and the booster. And so that is what then enables us to even be able to talk about doing this with this current mission. So I wanted to talk a little bit. If you noticed, that video kind of walks through the succession of learning that we've had. At the very beginning, doing those little hopper missions, I mean, that's pretty crazy. Who takes a water tank, modifies it, and decides to try to make a rocket out of it so that we can like go figure out how to be able to do landings and be able to work through it. We are constantly trying to get to flight so we can learn and make the next rocket better. And the fact that we have all that capability at Starbase really allows us to do that. You know, when I worked for NASA, it would take years sometimes to be able to make hardware changes. And we would sometimes not make a hardware change because we would be always, you know, having to be careful about how much time was it going to take. And what that meant was sometimes we were flying with things that were less capable than we wanted to test because we just couldn't get it done in time. It is so amazing to work for a company that now, like, we're able to just, if we go, oh, crap, we would really like to fix that before the next mission, we know that we have people that can go build the parts and be able to install it and get it in not years, but in days, and then enable us to be able to go take that new design and be able to then test that particular configuration. Huge, huge benefit for us. But you can see that all those flights, every flight we learned a little bit more and got us farther for our mission. And so this next mission is going to be really critical for us because we're going to be wanting, as I've already said, to get that booster back. We're not going to bring the Starship back yet, but getting that first round and being able to work through that and being able to work the capture is going to be really critical for us. The next few slides are just continuing to kind of emphasize some of that learning that we've done every time. This is another thing that we learned. You know, when on our last mission, we were returning the Starship, and we actually, this is kind of, it's another place where it's awesome, but we actually left parts of the vehicle uncovered so that we could verify what is it like to not have thermal protection on part of the Starship and be able to get that data. And so we're able to, have instrumentation all over the Starship, and we're able to then thermally map how the vehicle was reacting as we're coming in. Along with that little flap there, that hung in there to the very, very end. And we all know that being able to understand when things are like about ready to fail, as an architect, engineer, one of the things we always struggle with is how much margin do you have? How much thermal margin do you have? How much structural margin do you have? And being able to see this kind of and have this kind of data enables us to be able to design and mature our designs based on real flight data and not just modeling. It also incredibly important for us to be able to anchor our models so that then it helps us be able to test and assess any changes that we need to make going forward. Our Mauro, our thermal protection engineer, was so happy with this test flight. After the flight, I don't think I could have seen anybody that he was just waiting to get all that data ingested into the model so that it would help him with his next round of design. Because you're always trying to perfect how much thermal protection do you need, and then being able to offset for what does that mean for your up mass capability. Next slide. So we already talked about how important it was for us to be able to demonstrate our being able to target and return the booster, and how important that's going to be for us to be able to then have that as a mission objective for this next mission. But this was an amazing thing for us that we were able to hit, and it enabled us, and we're also able to have comm with the vehicles on both the booster side and the Starship side. I saw pictures on that Starship reentry that I've never seen in 30 years working for NASA, because of the Starlink capability. We normally, when you go through the Earth's atmosphere, we have what's called our blackout zones where the comm systems don't work because of all the plasma. And so it was the first time I've seen lots of capsules re-enter. It's the first time I've ever seen one actually come through the plasma and be able to see the plasma effects on the vehicle because of our Starship comm. So that's also another reason why the FAA, because we're able to make sure we have comm with the vehicle, that enables us to be able to use termination systems or other guidance maneuvers and be able to control the vehicles. And it's another safety feature that we have for us to be able to ensure that we're going to fail safe. Next slide. Oh, video. So this is giving you a little bit of a taste of what's to come, what we want to do on this next mission. So I don't know if any of you guys think that's going to be easy, but this is why you're going to, if this happens and you hear those sonic booms, we're going to have some really, like those, you saw that video of people jumping up and down. There's going to be some people jumping up and down. Obviously, we're able to demonstrate that entry capability, and now what this enables us to do is to be able to show that we can capture it and with the arms, our tower arms, and then be able to put it back on the mount. This is a very unique tower design. No other launch company has a tower design like this, where that single, we call it our chopsticks, where our chopsticks are used multifunctionally. They're used to stack the vehicle, they're used to catch the vehicle, they're used to move the vehicle around. I mean, it's this very, very flexible system that we have that the teams designed for, and it's the same intent in mind is how do we do this as cheaply as possible, as flexibly as possible, have systems that are integrated that can conduct our end-to-end mission, and which means doing testing, being able to stack, being able to launch, and being able to return. Next slide. So we're continuing to work our cadence. I mean, we've got Flight Vehicle 6, obviously Flight Vehicle 5's, like we're getting ready to have it sitting on the pad in mid-September. We're still working with the FAA on doing all of our final analysis, making sure that we're clearing all the hurdles to be able to get our license. But we are also working on Flight 6, Flight 7, Flight 8, Flight 9 vehicles are all in flow. If you went into the factory today, you'd see like our boosters and the vehicles lined up as we're getting ready for our successive missions going forward. We're not just working on license applications, obviously, for Flight 5, but we're also working for the other missions going forward, along with the flight objectives that we have, because we have to continue to demonstrate additional capability for us eventually to be able to launch our tanker design that will be fueling the human landing system that will, like I mentioned before, will be going and rendezvousing with Orion spacecraft around the moon and landing in the 2026 timeframe, U.S. astronauts once again on the moon. So if you can look at this, we're building a versatile launch system that can go in LEO, that can take people to the moon, and that will be able to enable us to be able to one day go to Mars.
operation.